Chapter 476, Arrival at the Primitive World of the Wood Spirit. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. If you say we are even, then, of course, we are even. Without hesitation, Jiang Yuochen took the 2 tickets. An unnatural expression rose on Aoxinyan's pale face. It clear that she was slightly embarrassed. After all, Jiang Yuochen had saved her life. How could that be repaid with 2 tickets? The Red Wish emissary, the Orange Star emissary, and the 18 glazed knights all proceeded to buy tickets. We would like to buy tickets, too. Another group of people came in. Jiang Yuochen looked over and saw 3 familiar figures. They were Page, the 41st person on the heaven board, Zai Yongxi, a disciple of Saint Zai Gentry, and Zuo Quling, a disciple of Saint Zuo Gentry. Other than them, 18 masters of the completion of the heaven realm followed behind. One could tell just by looking into their eyes that they were not people to be taken lightly. With Page in the lead, they went to Chief Steward Shi and bought tickets. Afterward, Page, Zai Yongxi, and Zuo Quling came to the 2nd floor and sat down at a table to Jiang Yuochen's right. In the next tower, another 4 groups of people arrived at Star Hall and bought tickets from Chief Steward Shi. Most importantly, these 4 groups of people were all at the completion of the heaven realm. The leaders of every group were all high-ranking masters on the heaven board. The Red Wish emissary crossed her snowy white legs and elegantly lifted the jade cup. She stared at Jiang Yuochen and smiled. It's becoming more and more lively. Chief Steward Shi also felt that something was not right. The primitive world of the wood spirit was only an inferior primitive world. Even though it had some rare spiritual medicines, in terms of danger and profit, it was incomparable to some of the other treasure worlds. How could it attract so many masters? Did the primitive world of the wood spirit give birth to some incredible treasure? Chief Steward Shi shook his head and felt that this was too unlikely. If the primitive world of the wood spirit had given birth to a marvelous treasure, he would definitely be the first to know about it. I hope it won't cause too much of a ruckus. Since he had already taken their money, Chief Steward Shi had to ensure they got to the primitive world of the wood spirit, even if he felt like something strange happening. On the contrary, Jiang Yuochen appeared unusually composed. He did not cower at the appearance of these masters, since he had already decided to retrieve the chi of origin of the primitive world of the wood spirit. He had to push through regardless of the danger. Even if he chose another primitive world, these people would still follow him. At the 10,000 Fields Tavern, everyone respected the rules and did not immediately try to attack Jiang Yuochen. This night appeared to be very calm. The next day, Chief Steward Shi indeed found a ship on time. With everyone on board, they passed through the wormhole and flew toward the primitive world of the wood spirit. Upon arrival at the primitive world of the wood spirit, the ship stopped in an endless forest and hovered 30 meters above the ground. Chief Steward Shi stood on the side of the ship and said, "We have arrived. You can now disembark. After a month, I will be here again. If you want to return to the Myriad Chaos Mountain." Suddenly, Chief Steward Shi's voice stopped and his gaze fixed on the horizon. A few black spots appeared there. Chief Steward Shi's expression changed, and he cried, "Not good. It's a patrol of guards responsible for this world. You have to get off now, quickly, quickly, quickly." Without any hesitation, Jiang Yuochen jumped down from the ship. In a flash, he charged into the boundless ancient forest. Blackie also jumped down and followed closely behind him. "Jiang Yuochen, where are you going?" Aoxinyan was always at Jiang Yuochen's side and thus, at the first moment, she followed him off the ship and stayed close behind him. Seeing Jiang Yuochen jump down, the other warriors immediately caught up. Boom! A moment later, the ship, which had been hovering 30 meters above the ground, shot into the sky with an accompanying boom from the space fluctuation. It disappeared from the primitive world of the wood spirit. Jiang Yuochen pushed his speed to the limit and reached a speed twice that of sound. In the space of 10 breaths, he was already hundreds of kilometers away. He paused briefly and looked toward the horizon, only to see 10 black dots flying in the direction of where the ship had been. Sky Eye. A spot of light rose between Jiang Yuochen's brows and created a vertical sky eye. With the power of the sky eye, he could finally see the 10 black dots clearly. They were actually 10 giant savage beasts, specifically purple tiger-like dragon beasts. It was a superior fourth-class savage beast. Its fighting strength was above that of a warrior at the completion of the Heaven Realm. An armored soldier sat on the head of each of the 10 purple tiger-like dragon beasts. Of the 10 soldiers, 9 had a martial cultivation that had reached the completion of the Heaven Realm. The person in the lead had already surpassed the Heaven Realm and had reached the Fish Dragon Realm. There were obviously the Ministry of War guards that Chief Steward Shi had noticed. This was probably just a small team of them. As Zhang Yuochen used Sky Eye to observe them, the leading soldier seemed to have felt something, and he turned his head. He stared in Zhang Yuochen direction, hundreds of kilometers away. Zhang Yuochen immediately withdrew his Sky Eye and pulled the aura back into his body. He once again executed a bodily movement and flew into the distance. "Captain, what's wrong?" a patrolling soldier asked. The patrol captain withdrew his gaze and his eyes were cold. He said, "The people who snuck in this time are quite powerful." Just then, I clearly felt a gaze observing us. However, when I looked in that direction, the gaze disappeared. Was it a monk in the Fish Dragon Realm? The captain shook his head and said, "It shouldn't be." Although the 10,000 Fields Tavern has some connections with a major figure in the Ministry of War, they do smuggle some people into the primitive world of the Wood Spirit, but they don't dare to overdo it. They probably wouldn't smuggle in a monk in the Fish Dragon Realm. It should be a warrior on the Heaven Board. What should we do now? There's no need to bother much about it. If we see any intruders, we will seize all of them. If they dare to resist, then we kill them. The 10 purple tiger-like dragon beasts rushed down and landed on the ground. The guards began to search for intruders. An hour later, Zhang Yuochen was already far away from that patch of forest. He had arrived at the banks of a large river. The river water was so clear that he could see the colorful rocks lying on the bottom. Although the primitive world of the Wood Spirit was an inferior primitive world, it was filled with spiritual chi. The air was very clean and giant ancient trees grew everywhere. Various exotic plants and rare herbs of blue, green, purple, red, and thousands of other colors grew on the ground. They gave off a faint fragrance of flowers and spiritual medicine. Zhang Yuochen did not have the time to pick any spiritual medicines. He looked behind him and saw Blackie, who had caught up. He asked, "How can I find the primitive world of the Wood Spirit's chi of origin?" Blackie stood on his back legs and extended a paw. He said, "Give the yin-yang wooden map to me. Only by using it can we find the chi of origin." A bright light flashed from between Zhang Yuochen's eyes. The yin-yang wooden map flew out and landed in front of Blackie. Blackie slowly opened it. 2 gusts of genuine chi flowed out from his paws and entered the picture. Some inscriptions on the picture flashed with a dark light and slowly flowed around. Immediately after, they flew out and charged into the ground, with the scroll as the center. The black lights spread out in all directions like strands of thread. A moment later, Blackie put it away and said, "The map has already located the general direction of the chi of origin. We can head that way now." Of course, the chi of origin has spirituality, so it has probably already sensed the dangerous aura. It will certainly use some methods to try and fight us. The chi of origin was the master of a realm. It was also known as the spirit of the world, heavenly way, karma, and destiny. It could decide everything in this world. In the darkness, it could control the destiny of every single thing. If it felt that someone meant harm to them, then it would first take steps to use the rules of this world to get rid of the people that meant it harm. Some powerful Qis of origin could even use the power of thunder, fire, water, etc. It would use the power of heaven and earth to kill any living creature that threatened it. "Zhang Yuochen, you cannot escape me." A sweet-sounding woman's voice came from the distance. In the woods, a human shadow flashed by. Alxinian flew down from the top of the branches. Her long hair spread open in the air like a waterfall and her long, green skirt lifted up, revealing 2 pin-straight and slender legs. As she landed on the ground, Alxinian pushed out her full chest and raised her snow-white chin, staring proudly at Zhang Yuochen. Zhang Yuochen and Blackie looked at each other. Zhang Yuochen said, "Alxinian, I am in the primitive world of the Wood Spirit because I have something important to do. I urge you not to follow me. You might run into some unexpected calamities." Zhang Yuochen was not using his words to try and scare her. He was giving her honest advice. Zhang Yuochen had come to the primitive world of the wood spirit to defeat the Chi of Origin. In other words, he was going to make an enemy of the entire world. It was impossible to guess what tricks the Chi of Origin would use to fight Zhang Yuochen, but one thing was certain. Zhang Yuochen could be in danger at any moment. He could face natural and man-made disasters. Traveling along with him was a very dangerous thing. Axian huffed coldly and said, "Stop threatening me. In any case, before I defeat you, don't think you can leave my line of sight." Zhang Yuochen tried to convince her again. "If you keep following me, how will you have time to practice? If you don't have time to practice, how can you defeat me? You should not have come here. I urge you to find a place to hide, and then leave on the 10,000 Fields Tavern's ship after a month. Do you look down on me?" Axian's eyes turned to ice, and she said, "Given my power, do I need to hide in an inferior primitive world?" Zhang Yuochen glanced behind Axian and cried out, "Be careful.